This talks about a case study of Intuit Live Community's use of Solr. And I'm Floyd Morgan. Thanks for coming. Here's the agenda about me, about Live Community, Live Community Search. I'm going to talk a little about natural language processing, which we make use of in Live Community, some next steps, and then some Q&A. So I'm a principal software engineer in Intuit. I've worked in Intuit about 12 years. I work in San Diego. I know you've probably heard of some of our products. We have over 200 applications, 7,000 employees worldwide, and over $3 billion in revenue. I started in TurboTax engineering in the TurboTax product line. I don't know if you've heard of TurboTax. It's #1 do-it-yourself tax preparation product in the U.S. Over 20 million people use it each year, and it's a $1 billion business. Over $1 billion of Intuit revenue. So I worked on all aspects of TurboTax, the core tax engine, the calculation subsystem, TurboTax Online, the JavaScript UI down to the core tax server. I worked on a number of new initiatives. One came to market, one didn't, and the reason the one didn't is because I started this project, TurboTax Live Community. And now I'm in the Central Technology Organization, where our charter is to spread Live Community throughout the company, which it already has somewhat. All right, so what's Live Community? It's a user contribution system, primarily questions and answers. We could really support almost any content type, but we chose Q&A originally, and it was very effective and very useful and extremely in demand in TurboTax. What's unique about Live Community, it can be integrated into an application contextually. And I'll show you an example of that. And this was the real power of it. And because it can be integrated, it can present a unique page in each integration point, and also provide Q&A that's relevant to a page. We use social technology and data for our value proposition, which is really assisting users in the different products that Live Community is integrated with. We launched our beta in 2007 in the home and business version. Then we spread to Premier, to Basic, to Deluxe, to the desktop product, to it's deductible online, TurboTax Business, until we don't have any more TurboTax products we can integrate with at this point. We use open source, primarily open source. Apache Web Server, Ruby, Ruby on Rails, MySQL, Memcached. We use ActiveMQ. We use Solr, that's why we're all here. And others, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And it's a platform too. Supports APIs. You can skin the UI. And we have dynamic provisioning in our Intuit data centers, which means you can create a community on the fly, tear it down. And we're working on that provisioning to work in Amazon Web Services as well. Here's a screenshot of Intuit Money Manager. This is a Quicken Online product for the Indian market. This Live Community instance actually runs in an Indian data center, and which was much easier to do with open source software. Here's a version of Live Community that supports QuickBooks Online in the UK. Here's an internal version of Live Community. This is it for Intuit development. Here's a version of QuickBooks Online in the US. And TurboTax Desktop and Online. This is what this talk is primarily centered around. First, some terminology. When I refer to consumers, I'm talking about the users who consume our content, that in the many ways we make it available. And they're in the millions. And we have contributors. These are users who are answering questions. They can comment, and they can do other things for the community that benefits the community, but generally they're answerers, and they're in the thousands. Our top contributors, which are in the hundreds, these are our super users, and we give these users special privileges in the community to do a number of different things, and they contribute in the thousands of answers. And we have employees too. A pro is a domain expert for the domain that the Live Community is running in. For instance, in TurboTax Live Community, that'd be tax domain. tech pros, a developer, and moderators moderating the community. When I refer to tax season, generally it's defined as between January 1st, April 15th, but for us it starts in December. And that's when all the TurboTax products are live and shipped. Okay, TurboTax Live Community. We're the largest community, over 150 servers. We can support loads or concurrency of over 200,000. We've had 23 million users use the service, over 8 million last tax season. We had 32 million unique page views last tax season. The in-product views are in the billions, and I'll show you what that in-product view looks like. Right now, TurboTax Live Community has over 750,000 answered questions. And in one day, peak day, we can receive 10,000 alone. And our contributors, like I said, answer thousands of questions. Our top contributor has answered 70,000 questions alone. All right, I'll show you a demo, how it works. So I'm going to start an instance of TurboTax Online. Okay, what you see to the right, there's Live Community in TurboTax Online. And as you navigate, you'll see the page change. Each TurboTax Online page has a unique Live Community page. And so any questions which are asked on this page can potentially become popular answers. And we have technology, a few algorithms we use to determine what's most relevant for this page. And you can see there's a search ask control functionality here where you can either ask your questions or you can search. And I'll go into more detail about this in a second. You can also navigate directly to Live Community from the web. Now this rendering is done by the same application that rendered the in-product view, which is this right here. Okay, so Live Community search, why Solr? So lots of features, functionality. It seems to be accelerating, which is great. Ease of integration. It's a web service. You can integrate over HTTP. You can scale it independently, which is important to us for this last tax season. And I'll go into detail why that was. You know, you're going to need some search expertise. It's not something that out of the box can just do search for you, but that's okay. The community is growing. There's a lot more documentation, it seems to be lately, last few months, years. And Lucene Imagination is also there to help you, which they're helping us. And if search is really important, and that's not going to be, shouldn't be such a barrier to gain search expertise, which it is for us. Okay, I'll suggest, it's interesting to think that just a few years ago, this was some experiment by Google. Now it's become pretty ubiquitous on the web, except for stuff like that. Here's a screenshot of Live Community, the in-product view, which I just showed you in the demo, and our suggest functionality. So why do we like AutoSuggest? It provides a glimpse into our vast content. The in-product view, there's a challenge to communicate to our end users that there's so much content in Live Community. And AutoSuggest, we feel, does facilitate that somewhat. It's a simple facet query. Our implementation is still really Solr 1.2. We're really excited about the features of 1.4 and 3.1, but we have yet to really take advantage of them. And we use NLP to make it better. Without it, it wouldn't be that useful, I don't think. It's on every search touch point of our product. It's the second most frequent request now, and that's really because of an initiative which I'm going to talk about a little later. So in-product search. So this is what we call our mini search, kind of like mini-me. That's a screenshot. You saw it in the demo. And this is the primary search interface for consumers. This is how we bring search to TurboTax end users. It appears integrated. Now it's the most utilized search interface. You'll see in a second, you had to navigate to a search interface, but now it's built in the in-product view. makes all the content available. And this is important because not every question that's asked on a page in Live Community is relevant to the page. Actually, about 50-50. So that use case is solved very well by having search available no matter where they are in the product. Over 3 million users used this feature last tax season. And here's some Ruby code, it's a little snippet. This is a really simplification. It doesn't deal with load balancing, error handling, or the error processing we have to do, but it's really that simple to get started in Ruby. You require a Ruby Solr plugin in Rails, and we do a simple filter query here, and this is the consumer version of search, right? We're searching on answered questions. That's what the filter query represents. Okay, website search. This is the full version of search, the full version, not the mini version. Here's a screenshot. This is the primary search interface for our contributors and employees. More real estate, more facets, more suggestions. The facet search really empowers development teams to find issues, to narrow on issues, and to narrow on resolution of issues as well. Over 200 TurboTax issues were discovered via Live Community. And a lot of times they occur because we have answering parties. These are some TurboTax employees answering questions for our customers. You can see Live Community at the bottom there. And here's a simple query about, a term bug. You can see there was 200, unfortunately, unanswered questions about bugs. So here's our code snippet again. It's we changed the filter query to query unanswered questions. That's the change there. Instant answers. So instant answers, this is a feature of Live Community where we present similar answered questions for a user who's asking a question. So we search for the terms of the new question against our Solr index. We narrow the focus to the subject. Questions are composed of subject and detail. And we show a snippet of recommended answer. And we had an accidental A/B test one day. Our Solr indices got corrupted, so Instant Answers wasn't returning anything, and the questions doubled. So it's pretty effective. I'll show you a demo here. So, for instance, if I choose not to search, and I ask the community, this is Instant Answers, the feature at work. It's going to present you similar answered questions, and you can review them and decide or not, did it answer my question? And if you say no, you can go back, try another one. And if it did, you found your answer, you're done. That's Instant Answers. Okay, so we changed the query a little bit here. We changed the filter query back to answered, and we added a query field, so we're going to focus just on one field of a post, and that's the subject. Instant question. I don't really know what to use as an image for instant question, so this is the best I could come up with. We're so thankful when you answer a question in Live Community as a contributor, we will present you another unanswered question that's similar for free, no charge. And that's what it does, presents similar unanswered questions. Even with all the technology I've showed you, and I'm going to show you, we still have a number of duplicate questions. That's just kind of something that we strive to reduce constantly, but it's a tough problem to reduce completely. So we're trying to reuse your answer. So again, we search with the terms of the answered question. We narrow the focus to the subject again. And we use a date filter. And the reason for this is we've done some research about the likelihood of a user who asks a question that gets an answer that's longer than 7 days is very unlikely to come back and actually consume it. So contributors in user contribution systems like Live Community, they value feedback from users who are asking that they answer their question for. I'm a contributor as well. I answer questions during tax season, and the feedback you get is really important. You really want to help people, and you want the feedback that you did help them. This is a quote from one of our super users. When we launched the feature, aren't we addicted enough? And the answer is no. So here's a screencast of how it works. Here's a question. This is a real tax question, and we're going to answer it here. Submit the answer. And we present similar unanswered questions. And since you can just bring one up and just paste your answer in if it was similar. Okay, so the query's changed a little bit here. We changed the filter query back to unanswered questions, and we added a Boolean operator, and also we changed the filter query to filter by date. And that's the created at date there. Okay, answer bot. Now it's not a robot. It's if you ask a question in Live Community and it's unanswered, we'll continue to search for you the day after you ask. So we send you an email of similar answered questions. And it runs for 7 days. And we send you another email if the results have changed. We don't send you an email if the relevancy orders change, just if the actual results themselves have changed. We get explicit feedback from this feature, and from it, 39% say it answered their question. So it's pretty effective. Here's a screenshot of the email you'll receive. We restate your question, we list the answered questions which are similar, and we also prompt you to maybe try search again because we have so many answered questions. Advertising. So you may be wondering why or what does Live Community Search have to do with advertising? And Don Draper's thinking the same thing, I'm sure. We use our user-generated content in advertising. The reason being is because there's a 300% higher click-through rate than static banner ads. We run the ads throughout the tax season on many ad networks, and the content selection is automated and continuous, and this is where Solr comes in. Here's a screenshot of the ad. You can actually flip through the number of answered questions that the ad provides, and you can also type in your own question. This will take you to Live Community. Here's a high-level view of how it works. We take all our application server logs. We MapReduce to extract the terms of either questions have been asked, questions have been viewed, or actually search terms. We use Carrot, another open source technology, to cluster to see what's trending. And then we use Solr and we get the content for those terms. Then we apply some heuristics about making sure the question is appropriate before we launch it into our ad network. And then we store it in our database, and it's retrieved by an API. And the reason we do this is that whatever's trending in Live Community, you want that content to flow through the ad network. If it's relevant in Live Community, it's probably relevant elsewhere. And here's a little snippet of the return of the API call. P2P is the trending term. That's a publicly traded partnership. Okay, search everywhere. So I mentioned it before. What is search everywhere? It was a definite change to our user experience where we emphasize search. Search is first now. Ask is second. It used to be ask first, search later, or never. Here's a before and after screenshots. You can see to the left was focusing on asking your question, and the right is search and ask, or search or ask. So we're going to put search in front. We're going to make it very, very obvious that you can search. So with this initiative, autocomplete was everywhere too, and like I said before, it was became our second most frequent request. We had to scale our search portion of our architecture, and that's what I mentioned earlier, that sort of made this really easy. So we went from 4 32-bit Linux machines to 10 64-bit Linux machines, and to achieve a request rate of 300 requests per second. So with this change, search requests increased by 900%, and questions decreased by 50%. And you may be asking, was that good? Well, we think so. And the reason is it brought more users in, they consume more content, and from our other ways we measure effectiveness, they actually rose a little bit, so it was very good. Here's our architecture. Requests come into the app server, which is Ruby on Rails. We hit the search cluster. The cluster returns IDs, and then we go to our database cluster to render the results. The indexing occurs offline to the right there. We have a local version of Solr running on the index server, and the index server is watching the database for any changes. It updates the index on the indexing server, and then we use the facilities of replication that Solr provides to push it out to the search cluster. Okay, so NLP. Fortunately, search is not enough. Our domain is noisy and it's kind of ugly at times. I'm going to show you some examples and you focus on the subject of these questions. I can translate this for you. This user's asking, can I prepare another return? Here's a verbose example. This user's asking, I filed, it was rejected, can I file again? The answer is yes. I don't know what this user's asking. No idea. And unfortunately, I do know what this user is saying, but NLP can't help. This is a complaint about our product, TurboTax. Okay, how it works. So here's the canonical question of TurboTax Live Community. Where do I input a 1099? So this actually semantically equals this. This equals this. So how do we make this equal that? Well, we take the standard text field of Solr. You see the analyzers there, but they don't do a whole lot. We do most of the processing in our app server. So we have a custom dictionary. The dictionary contains spelling corrections, contains synonyms. It also contains stop words. And we combine them with a lot of regular expressions. That's how we do all the NLP processing. And this is the workflow. We spell check it, we stem it, we do some word collocation, which is like phrase analysis. We do some stop word and phrase correction and removal. We do some synonym substitution. Tax domain correction is all the permutations of a form field that you may encounter. And phrase encoding is identification of some common phrases. And also, this assists in if you submit a Boolean operator to preserve that. Here's a little code snippet. This is a class we created, the semantic filter. It wraps all our NLP. It wraps the management of the dictionary as well. And as you can see, the two question examples I showed you, the return's the same. This is what actually we index. Those terms right there. It works well, but it's not perfect. And this is a quote from one of our super users. NLP happens to really broaden recall. Well, actually, sometimes it provides recall, some recall at all. But it can broaden as well. And NLP is getting in this user's way. This user knows exactly what they're looking for, and we're not assisting them doing that. It's not just for search. We also use it for recommendations, and it's not this kind of recommendation. We actually deliver unanswered questions to our contributors, and the reason why is there's just too much content to scan manually. Like I said earlier, TurboTax Live Community can receive 10,000 questions in a day. That's 1,000 pages that even our most engaged users will not scan entirely. We base it on your past answering behavior, and we recommend a question. We can recommend a question to multiple contributors to increase probability of getting an answer. And we use Mahout Machine Learning Library for this, another open source technology. Here's a high-level picture of how it works. We take unanswered questions from our database. We apply the NLP technology to it, and what comes out of it are user and post vectors. The user vectors represent all your past answering behavior, and the post vectors represent the unanswered questions. And then we bring them together in Mahout, and apply some heuristics about pertaining to what question goes where and like how good of a match does it need to be. And here's a screenshot. This is actually recommendations for me. You can navigate into an area of Live Community that contains your Q&A, and this tab represents recommendations just for me. This is a beta feature, and it's pretty promising. Looks pretty promising so far. So what are our next steps? We're going to rewrite our search implementation. Most of it, anyway. Kind of kidding. Real-time indexing, for sure. As soon as we added faceting and leveraging the Solr faceting about date and time, we started seeing more requests or even lower latency of when a post is indexed, or even when any piece of content we have is indexed. And there's a lot of talk about this conference about relative indexing. I'm exciting to see. Question versus query. This is to assist users who know exactly what they're looking for and not getting in their way. Like I mentioned before, sometimes the NLP gets in our user's way. And so this is one thought of how doing it, is that we look at your query or what you're submitting in real time, decide what your intent is. Because if your intent is a query, most likely we don't want to apply the NLP technology. And if it's a question, we definitely want to. Social feedback. So we have a lot of behavior data, as you can imagine. Users asking, answering, viewing, voting, flagging. We've tried to use social feedback to improve relevancy, but we haven't been successful. It's tough to do. And there's some reasons which I don't go into in this talk about it. But one thought is about page ranking could be an opportunity for us, because a lot of answers that are submitted in Live Community have links to other content, external, but also lots of links back to our own content. And I think that we could create some value by mining that. Social dictionaries. Creating dictionaries is actually kind of expensive and time-consuming. Kind of a dream of mine to have the community contribute the dictionary. So it's much easier to go into other verticals. And our community can do very specialized work for us. And we had, example was content classification, which we did last tax season. We had our community classify whether a question was a tax-related question or a product-related question. And they did 60,000 in a month. And it was highly accurate. And my next step may be kind of early, but maybe not too early for me. Anyway, thank you, and any questions? So I think the question is, how can we use the location to improve relevancy in search? So that's a great question, and right now we don't. And we've tried some things. It's hard because we've tried to apply the popularity of a question in the location, but it's hard to normalize across the entire product because certain portions of Live Community have a lot more traffic than others. So it's hard to weigh and for it to work well. We're working on it, but we haven't made much progress on it. Answer your question? Yeah. It's a tough problem. Again, it's the social feedback I talked about. We definitely want to leverage it. It drives the ranking of the popularity on each page. But for search, relevancy is pretty good. That's really what it comes down to. More questions? Yes?
Your auto-suggest works really well. How are you doing that? Is that every time you type, is that a Lucene query, or are you just querying the database?
Yeah, it's a Lucene query.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, all auto-suggest to go through the NLP as well. It's a certain number of characters at a certain period of time. We'll actually do an AHAS request, hits the app server. It's actually processed by the NLP, goes to Solr, comes back out.
Okay, and just returns the title of the question.
If we're making a suggestion, yeah, which is usually the case. Or sometimes it's a related word. Okay. Yeah, sometimes what you saw was a rephrasing of a question. Because there's the canonical where do I input is there's many forms, and we rephrase it right on the fly. Yeah.
And in your infrastructure diagram, you mentioned that you have your relational database, right? You have Solr just watching the database,
Yeah.
right?
It's actually, yeah, I'm sorry. It's actually a Ruby on Rails app. It's an offline Ruby on Rails app that's doing that, but it's interacting with Solr and the database.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where the latency comes in. What you're trying to do is do the real time, like for every CRUD operation you want to update.
Yes. Eventually. Okay. Yeah, there's some latency there because we got to push it out to the cluster, and our users are asking us to do it as soon as possible. Yeah, it's not just for our consumers portion utilization of the content, but also the administration of the site. Like for instance, I don't really go into this, but we index all of our users too. You know, the user profiles, the nicknames, email addresses, and for administration purposes, the live community, our moderators want that stuff indexed immediately. Because they want to find users, they actually want to give users special privilege like employees quickly when they sign them up. So, yeah, they would take it as soon as we could do it. Yes? Great question. So the questions, do we use power users' answers or the fact they answered a question in relevancy? And the answer is no. Again, that's another experiment we tried, and it's just, well, put it this way. So they answer so many that we don't really have to influence relevancy all that much because you're most likely going to get an answer by them because they're so prolific. But we have tried to tweak relevancy a little bit. It doesn't, we haven't made it better. All right, well, thanks for coming.